Welcome. In front of me I have the, well, I would say new released Motorola Razr phone, but it was released like a little bit over 2 months ago. So not necessarily the newest one, but still pretty exciting. I wasn't actually aware that this phone got released worldwide because previously this specific one, the Motorola Razr, was being released in China apart from like the first one, if I'm correct. So the second one and like the third one were China only, and this would be, I believe, just a third one. So it's technically named Motorola Razr 2022, but still. Oh, that was useless. Do I have another one? No, I don't. Anyway, let me just pop it open. Now, I will be honest, I will be probably comparing this phone a little bit to my daily driver, which is the Fold 4. So that's what I've been using for the past, well, since it was released. So I do have a little bit of an idea on foldable, I guess, so we'll see how that feels. I like the packaging, most certainly more premium feeling than the Samsung ones, even though Samsung is more expensive. So yeah. So here we got our phone. Let's set it to the side for now and just look at what we get inside. Now, just to mention this, we do have a little padding right here, so don't worry about the phone. We get a charger, something that Samsung didn't include. I can just get it out, come on. There we go. It's a Type-C charger, so that would mean that we also have a Type-C cable on both ends. We do have a 30-watt charger, as you can see right here, it's written 30, it's the wattage. So, pretty decent charger. Now we get some paperwork right here and some ejectable. I'm not gonna even open that up. And we get a cable right here. So like I said, Type-C to Type-C, both ends. And something that, again, Samsung didn't include is a case for your phone. Now this phone isn't the cheapest, I will be honest. It comes at well over $1,000, so it costs about $1,300, give or take like 50. So it's not the cheapest one, but it's still cheaper than Fold 4, which this comes at about $1,800. Doesn't include a charger and doesn't include a case. Now here we get a case. Now one thing that I do have to mention, these cases usually have stickers on them. Not sure if this is a sticker or not. Let me see if this comes off. Yep, that's a sticker. So you peel these black things off and then you put it on, so it should stay on your phone. Otherwise it might just kind of, when you clip it on, slide off like this. Something that the foldable phones basically all have in common, that the cases for them might not be the best kind of thing. Anyway, we also have something here. Oh no, it's just for the charger. Anyway, just close this off. Really nice packaging, I do have to say. And let's get into the phone. Oh, come on, did you have to rip? There we go. Now, I remember this phone not being as wide as this. This is a wide boy. Now, they did drop the previous little lip right here that was, well, typical of like the Razr devices. So now it's just, well, really similar to what Samsung does with their clamshell phones. So again, it would just... Wait, what? Oh, that is weird. When you start folding the display, you can see that it tries to fold outwards. That can't be good. Okay, you most certainly can see that on the camera. Let me just kind of... Ooh, that's... I don't believe that is good, but I might be wrong. Anyway, as you can see, when you fold it up, just a typical clamshell. Before, the bottom portion was coming further out and also just coming on the top side. So it kind of looped around. Something that this just dropped and has just this typical Samsung design now. Now, in terms of opening and closing, it flips just nicely. It has this resistance right here. From here to here, it's kind of loose, though not necessarily, it's not going to open or close on its own. And then to a certain portion, it just clips. There we go. Just flips open. I'll mention this because on my Fold, you tend to be able to just open it at any kind of position. That works, but get to this point where it just kind of clips, but it, after just like what, 2 months of use, as you can see, it's not clipping fully straight. I need to put force to straighten it out myself, and yeah, it's kind of disappointing. So anyway, I'll just turn this on. We do have a fingerprint combo as a power button, looks like. Now the width of the device does add a little bit wonk to it. This phone is quite wide. If I would actually compare it to any normal phone, let me just grab one. So we have a typical phone size to compare this to, because on the camera it might not look like it's a weird form factor, but boy oh boy is this phone wide. Now, I did go and grab the widest thing that I could find as a comparison, which is the Pro Max iPhone. And you can see that they're almost the exact same size. Just one has a hideous little cutout, while the other one has a tiny little hole punched camera. Now, if I slap this on top, you can see that in terms of the size, they're almost identical. Motorola Razr is a little bit taller. Can see it here, but other than that, it's almost the exact same size. The display right here is less. Well, iPhone has a wider display rather than Motorola. Motorola has just bigger bezels to accommodate for that folding display to hold it in place. Now, another thing that is different, at least on here, rather than if we compare it to something like a Fold, the display right here folds differently. So again, I'm going to go back to this kind of look right here. When it starts folding, you can see that it starts to create this massive space right here. And it folds it kind of like a teardrop. Something that Samsung doesn't do, just because they want to keep the phones waterproof. To be completely honest, I do prefer this kind of idea, just because the little fold area right here on the display isn't as noticeable as it is on a Fold, which you can see the crease right. Okay, so my camera did run out of storage, so I need to kind of start over from a little bit. So anyway, let's just jump straight back to it. So I'm gonna go over the specs of this device first. So right here in the display, the inside one is a 6.7-inch display, 1080p by 2400. It has a what's called a foldable P-OLED display, 1 billion colors, 144 Hz display, and HDR10 Plus. Now, when it comes down to percentage, it's 81.3% screen to body ratio. So the bezels are substantial here, considering this phone is pretty modern. And we have 393 pixels per inch. So the display here is pretty nice. Now, moving on, we are running a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, which is the same one that is in the Fold 4 and a bunch of phones that have been released like halfway throughout, or second half of the 2022. And we have a couple different options in terms of storage. So the base one is 128 gigs with 8 gigs of storage and goes all the way up to 512 with 12 gigs of storage. All of the storages here are UFS 3.1, so they should be pretty fast. And I'll mention one more thing in terms of the storages. So this phone is capable of recording 8K 30 frames or 4K 60 as an example. And because of that, if you're planning to utilize the video recording on here, especially at 4K, I would recommend going for something above 128 gigs of storage, just because we don't have expandable storage in here. So if you're planning to record at this kind of format, your storage will run out really quickly. And just to kind of show you, no expandable storage, just a single SIM card. Okay. Now, with that being said, we can move over to the next one, which is the cameras. So if I fold it, you can see the camera setup right here with a lot of smudges. Perfect. So we have a dual camera setup right here. The main one is a 50 megapixel wide sensor, and then we get a 13 megapixel ultra wide. And like I mentioned, we can record at 8K 30 or 4K 60 and so on going down. And inside, we have a little hole punched camera right here. And this is a 32 megapixel wide sensor. And again, it can record at 1080p, 30 and 60. Now, next thing would be the battery size. So even though this device is pretty chunky, it's not necessarily the smallest device considering it's foldable, it has relatively small battery size at 3500. Now this is normal battery capacity for foldable devices, just because they do need to accommodate space for hinge, and also the battery usually placed into 2 different compartments, so they do have to struggle a bit with space right here, and because of that the battery suffers. And right now we're at 69% battery life. Nice. Anyway, next thing to mention would be charging here. So like I did show you at the beginning, we do have a 30 watt charger. So we do have a pretty decent charging speeds right here. Where is it? There we go. So yeah, 30 watts should give you a pretty decent charging speed, especially with that smaller battery capacity. Should probably be able to top out the battery to full in like 40 minutes, 50 minutes maybe, hopefully. I'm just guessing this, I don't have any kind of actual numbers, so take it with a grain of salt. Now moving over to the price tag, we are looking at a pretty high price tag right here for this device. So we're looking at over $1,300. Now, like I mentioned, I thought that this device was only in China, but it looks like it has been released to the rest of the world. And even though it has been released to the rest of the world, I do consider this to be a little bit overpriced, because this phone doesn't really give you anything that you couldn't get for something like, for instance, this. Now I'm bringing an iPhone, even though I despise them, but it's a almost identical size right here, while costing less, surprisingly, and giving you still more, surprisingly. Now, I'll mention a couple of the benefits here, but I'll also be really honest and say that these benefits don't come from Motorola themselves, but basically just like the Chinese market, and probably also cost savings, which cost savings in this case come out to be a positive in my opinion. Even though you don't really see that in the price tag, you do get to see it in the design. And I'll mention or explain what I mean. So if we consider something like a Fold 4 or maybe even the Flip 4. The Flip 4 would be a much closer apples to apples comparison, just because it's the same kind of design where it just has this clamshell design where it just folds in. And as you can probably see, Motorola did take inspiration from Flip. They did this kind of like a lip that was before on their Razr devices. Now you don't have that anymore, so this is a much closer design to what you get with a clamshell design from Samsung. Now this phone is significantly wider compared to the Flip, and honestly, I don't know if that's a positive or not. I guess that really will depend on the user. But what I'm gonna get here at the end is that I probably wouldn't recommend this device, and in general I probably wouldn't recommend just a clamshell style like this, because you get to pay premium for something that isn't a premium feature, if that makes sense. Foldable display might be cool and all, it might be eye-catchy, and if you really want a phone that catches eyes of others, or you can just kind of like flip it over, then start clapping it. Trust me, this won't be the clap of other cheeks when you have this phone. So yeah, and the downside here, apart from you being able to clap only the phone, is that you get this really weak display. And I don't mean like in terms of the specs of the display, because the display here is quite good, but what I mean is the durability of it. This is plastic, and just as a comparison, I'll tell you just right away, just this, right? I have the brand new iPhone 14 Pro Max. I'm not afraid. I do have tempered glass on here, but I'm not afraid to just kind of slam it in here. The knife, right? I can tell you I would not want to even touch this display with the knife, because this coating right here is, as best as I can explain, plastic. I believe they might be calling it glass or like super thin glass, probably something like you have right here, but inside display I still wouldn't touch with the knife here either. So display right here is really soft, really prone to scuffs. I could take fingernail, ram it into the display, make it just kind of like slide it up, and you would see it. It would be there permanently. Something that obviously typical glass displays like this won't have, even without screen protection. So just because the display folds doesn't make it better. It's kind of what I'm getting at. And additionally, additional benefit of this kind of device would be that it's smaller in size. But it's not smaller in size. It's bullshit. It's just same size, folded in half. Now it's thicker. And just to kind of compare this, so unfolded, I'll just take off the case right here, just to have like the apples to normal smartphone. So when it's outside of the case, both phones, the actual Motorola Razr is still thicker than iPhone, and this is the Pro Max. Now if we account for the camera bump, then iPhone is thicker, but I'm not gonna count that in. So in terms of no camera bump on both devices, iPhone is thinner. Now consider that you also fold this in half. Now you have double thick phone. Now you don't see it right now, but if I flip it over like this, you do get to see the thickness difference right here. These phones this is just like two iPhones stacked on each other. So when it comes down to putting this in your pocket, this will give you a much bigger like bulge in your pocket over the typical phone. Just because it's folded in half, you have two phones now stacked on top of each other, just at a square size. And iPhone right here is probably the best comparison to a normal phone, just because they're almost identical size. So let me just kind of grab it like this. So in terms of height, Motorola is a little bit higher. In terms of just width, again, just a tiny bit wider. Now with that being said, the display right here is bigger than on the Motorola, just because you don't have to have these chunky bezels. You have pretty small bezels, so yeah. You also have this hideous hole punch right here that they're made into feature, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, so finishing this off and just giving like a last final thoughts. Also, I'm gonna actually give you one more thing to think about when looking at foldable devices. So this phone has a just clamshell design. It's neat. It's a clamshell design. If you like it, I guess you like it, but Samsung will have a better design, not better design, better price. That's what I'm going for. because Samsung Flip 4 costs 1,000 instead of 1,300, and it's running the same hardware as this, minus the cameras. I actually don't know what cameras are in the Flip 4. Now, one thing that is better here than it is on Flip 4 is the cover display. So this thing right here. So you got a cover display, has much more usability than you do have on the Flip 4. Flip 4 is just kind of dumb. But if we compare it to something like a Fold, now you can see that here I have a cover display that is literally just the entire phone. I can do everything on it. It's still pretty narrow. Still like a kind of feels like a remote control, but because this is the full fourth one, they did shrink the notch here, not notch, the hinge. There we go. And it is a little bit more usable. Typing on this is an absolute nightmare, I will be honest. But what I get is this enormous inside display, which is the main selling point of this device. But that being said, I bought this phone for a couple of reasons, and I'll be honest that those couple of reasons did change over course of using it, just because this phone is not the best at doing some of the things that I bought it for. Media consumption, as in TV shows, movies, not the best. I have no other words to describe this, but it's not the best. Here I have a YouTube video, if I can, flip, please, there we go. So here is a video of Linus. It is zoomed in, so let me just give you more apples comparison. There we go. So you can see we have significant black bars at the top and bottom. And if we consider this or compare it to something like an iPhone, you'll probably realize that the display difference isn't that big. If I would full screen this same video here, I'm not losing that much real estate. This display is like at, 8 inches apparently, but because it's in a almost a square form factor, I'm getting black bars on top and bottom, something that I don't get right here. Same video on here will be just a tiny bit smaller. It will be smaller, but the size difference right here is minuscule. And part of the problem is that if you're planning to have video on the inside display fill the entire display, you either have to crop it or you have to literally make this device even longer. So then you would have literally a remote control or something that probably resembles closer a stick. So obviously it wouldn't be the most optimal shape right here. So just because this is a bigger display doesn't mean you get more real estate for things that you might be interested in. And additionally, a bunch of apps don't really utilize the, 3x2 or 4x5 display aspect ratio. You don't get, let me just close this. So you don't get to utilize this massive display as much, and a bunch of applications do kind of not get to use it correctly. So at the end of the day, something like a normal phone like this might be better suited for whatever you need to do. I have just a couple of things that I do have to say work good on this kind of aspect ratio. So as an example, if I open up, just quickly close this. So if I open up something like TradingView, this is a great example. So here we go. If it actually loads, any day now. There we go. So there we go. So once it loads, you can have a massive canvas. It works pretty good for this, right? So this is a really good case scenario for a folding device. But these kind of examples are just really couple in between. I couldn't tell you that majority of my apps work best in this kind of aspect ratio. Majority of the apps that I have will benefit better from me using just a cover display right here, and that's sad truth. And when you have a clamshell design like this, you can unfold it. I mean, that's the only way you're gonna actually use the Android device here. And you have the downside of a folding device, but you don't have the upside of having a bigger phone. So that's kind of where I'm getting at. So at the end of the day, I don't think the clamshell phones like this one are really worth it. Maybe in the future, if these displays become more rugged, so they can, well, not be scratched by typical usage, then this would change. But at the end of the day, right now, these are very fragile displays that you do need to take care of and be very mindful of what you do with them. Otherwise, you might end up damaging them, and on top of that, having your phone be just broken, because in terms of clamshell, your inside display is the only real display that it can utilize for everything. You don't have two displays like, for instance, I do on a folding phone. So even if my screen in here, the one inside, breaks, I have the typical normal glass one at the front. So that is one of the biggest kind of problems that I would say are present right now with folding phones, and especially clamshell design like this. So hopefully that gave you a really good insight of this phone specifically, and also if a folding phone is for you. I believe that majority of people will not benefit from a folding phone. You could get one if you really want to, and if you're planning to get one, probably consider Samsung, just because it's cheaper while offering almost the exact same device. So with that being said, if you found this very helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.